Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod with Kai Fuentes. With us today, she is President and CEO at Ebony Marketing Systems. We're going to talk about market research into these communities that are diverse. That will be very insightful for me because sometimes I lack of stats in these communities, hence I don't really understand the reality, and excited to jump into that today. This podcast is brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one. Podcasts are great tools to learn, to generate leads, to grow your network, to also grow your networks because you can get clients off those. So podpire.com if you need help with your pod. Kai, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about Ebony?
Great. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Charles. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. I'm Kai Fuentes, President and CEO of Ebony Marketing Systems. We are a women-owned, multicultural-owned, full-service market research company. What does that mean? Well, it means that we speak particularly to the multicultural markets, African-American, Black, Latinos, AAPI communities. We are the liaison between the consumer and the actual end client. And that's kind of how I describe it to folks, Charles, because some people are like, what is qualitative research? Well, what we do is we do product improvement and product placement based on the customers, consumers' opinions, beliefs, and perceptions. So that's what we do in a nutshell. I've been doing this over 20 years. It's my passion. I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about running a small business. I'm passionate about talking to folks of different heritages and backgrounds and diversity. And I'm having a good time doing it too. So that's important.
Tell me insights that you have got running market research, I believe for 2 decades now. Am I reading this right?
Yeah.
That is a lot of time. That is like a lot of data and knowledge. So what have you learned from these diverse folks and communities since 20 years of your career?
That there are differences amongst how different ethnicities want to be spoken to. So the way we would talk to an unacculturated AAPI mom is very different than the way we would ask questions to a Black African-American mother, right? And understanding that those cultural nuances really begins in the beginning of the screening process. So people want to be spoken to. We've noticed that different ethnicities want to be spoken to differently. But the commonality is that everybody wants to be spoken to with honor and respect, and of course, respect for their heritage and culture. So there are some differences, but there's a lot more commonalities than differences.
Right. I think the connection, Kai, is red-ish. But yeah, let's pray the gods of Wi-Fi and make sure that this comes back.
Yeah.
Yes, the way you ask questions is important. I think, well, I have a bunch of other questions for you, like with other insights that you found out, but I think that's a great start, because if you don't ask the question in the right way in your market research or even verbally to someone, you will not get the response that you scientifically expect. I don't think you'll ever get the response you expect, but just to make the process more scientific and make sure that people don't get offended or view the question in some way that might bias their response, I guess asking it the right way is the way to go. How does one do that? Is it the way you ask a question without using some keywords? Is it the tone? Like, how do you make your questions scientifically answerable?
Well, it's all of the above, really. Let's start off with tone. Tone and tenor is everything, right? Because I can ask you a question, but if my tone is off, then that could be misconstrued the wrong way. You know, I have a 5-year-old, so I've also learned how to ask questions in a good way. And that's really important, being able to ask questions with the tone and tonality that goes behind that. That's the first piece. And then the second piece is, yeah, asking questions that really, really resonates with that culture, that captures their cultural nuance. And what we do sometimes, we will do cognitive interviewing to test the questions that we're going to ask even before actually testing it, to say, does this sound right to this culture? Does this make sense? If we're going to use a specific tone, or if we're going to use a specific word, does this word make sense? And that also happens with language too, as you translate it into other languages, making sure that those nuances are captured, and make sure those nuances make sense to that target audience. So it's a little bit of everything. It's tone and tenor, it's asking the right questions, testing the questions before you're actually talking to your subjects, to make sure that you're asking the right questions in the right way.
Give us some examples of the final product here in terms of questions, and what types of questions may you ask these communities?
Well, one in particular that, you know, has been floating around that we use a lot is, what best ethnicity and culture do you identify with? That's huge, versus what is your ethnicity? So I'm going to use myself for an example. I am a Black Latina, and I'm a proud Black Latina. However, if you ask me what culture I identify with the Black culture. Grew up more around it. It's just been more a part of my upbringing growing up. Yes, I go back to Costa Rica and see family, and respect that part of me, but I associate myself more with the Black culture. So somebody like me, if you're asking me what's my ethnicity, I'd say a Black Latina, and then you may put me in a group with Latinas and other Latinos, and that's fine. But if you really want to break it down, my culture, that I identify most with, is Black African American. So I would belong in that group, and talking to me amongst other Black African Americans, if that makes any sense.
And when you go to Costa Rica, do you feel American more than you feel Black American?
Mm, that's deep. I think that for me, when I go back to Costa Rica, I feel, you know, it's interesting. My Latina roots come out. So I feel more Latina when I'm there than, you know, when I'm in Queens, right? So yeah, and when I go home, when I go back to Costa Rica, my Spanish is great. Do you know what I mean? Like, it all comes back. I'm entrenched in the culture. Yeah.
Other than that, and you know these communities way more than I do. Like, what insights have you got on poverty mindsets and entrepreneurship in these communities? What problems or challenges do you see, and how would you potentially fix those?
That's a loaded question. The challenges that I see with these communities and entrepreneurship is lack of capital, period. You can't start a business without capital. You can't continue a business without capital. You can't sustain a business without capital. And access to capital is really, within these markets, Black, Latino, AAPI communities, that is the hardest piece, right? Is access to capital. Then when you start running your business, access to capital too, i.e. lines of credit. We found that within these communities, it is the hardest for them to get access to capital and lines of credit to sustain their business. So that's the first and foremost. And I think, you know, ways to fix that, I don't know. I mean, well, I have ideas of how to fix it. One would be to give folks more of a shot, you know, be making lending a little easier so people can start businesses. And I know there's a whole other piece to that, you know, but that's kind of the way I would think about, you know, fixing it, and having access to capital, also access to knowledge. Education is key. And if you have someone who has, had businesses in their family, they're going to be able to pick it up a lot faster than other people who don't. So what people can also do is provide, how to start a business, how to run a business, and they're out there. Education things are out there for this, but um, the tippy top is access to capital. You can't make a move without it, quite honestly.
Right. Because I started multiple of my businesses with like $50, sort of,
Yeah.
but did I had like various other privileges. For example, when I was younger and at school, first I was at school and my parents were paying for part of my rent. So that certainly helped. And yeah, I think I had good education also and a good background and no failure, no fear to fail. Um, I don't think that is necessarily the issue in these communities, like fearing to fail. I think a big challenge also is just the environment that you're kept in, and probably the ceiling that's put over your head. Oh, your parents, they've worked 9 to 5 their whole careers, and that's what you probably need to do. And starting a business, if it's not out of necessity, it won't be attempted most of the time. But you've been and interviewed in interviewed these communities for quite some time. For those that get to actually reach the start line, aka start a business, what challenges are there for them to sustain that business and scale that business?
Well, I just want to back up real quick, Charles. Also, I do think that communities. I hear what you're saying about being afraid to fail. I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. But some other communities have more privilege to fail, right? Like, let's just keep it real here. I'm a Black Latina business owner. I can't screw up. I don't have that space to screw up. I have to bring it harder than my white counterparts. And that's just what it is. And that's just the Black tax that I pay, period. Now getting back to your question, what was the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the
I got stuck
scale.
on the other
So
part.
yeah, well, let me comment first on that part. So
Yeah,
what do you mean by that? Because yes, I have safety nets. I don't want them, but I have them.
yeah.
Aka, like if I get dirt poor, I have a dad that unfortunately with my type of personality is always gonna support me. I do well if I'm fully independent. I'm like a pirate, so it's mostly not good for me. But I also have friends. I have a community of entrepreneurs that surround me, even before that, and I have I have lots of capital when it comes to relationships that I built over the year. Let's call it that way. So
Mhm.
what do you mean by you're Latina? Is it that you don't have people to support you if you fail? Is that what you mean?
I mean that, for instance, if we take people come to businesses of color already with a certain lens. And I've experienced this in my career. It's gotten better, but it's there. And people come to a woman of color business with kind of like almost sometimes expecting something to not go right or to not work out or all those things. So if I fail and screw it up with that client, well, as we all know the ratio here, when you lose one client, you're actually losing three because word of mouth and people talk. So I've seen other companies that are not companies of color screw up big projects and keep them because that's part of the privilege. I, on the other hand, can't screw it up because folks won't necessarily stick around for my screw up. And that's what I mean by that.
So do you mean like the bank, for example, it will they will permanently like be like, yo, she's not delivering, and she's of color. That's the stat that we have, and we're just not gonna give her any more shots. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I mean, just like also clients, like clients
Mm,
that, clients that I work with, I
this is
obviously
sad.
won't. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Who you telling? I
Yeah.
know.
But
Yeah.
you did it for 2 decades. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's nothing's guaranteed, but that's a long while. So coming back to my question, how does one do that? How does one keep doing good business for 20 years like you did, and in a community that doesn't have that privilege?
I run my business with two models. I work with integrity and authenticity. And that's really how I've sustained myself over 2 decades, is doing everything with integrity. So that means all projects, making sure folks get paid, making sure all the things, making sure the client's happy with integrity. And the authenticity part is doing it authentically, doing it with honesty, and doing it where you feel good about the work that you're doing because you're being authentic to yourself and to your clients. So I think, and then working like a mad
Yeah,
one.
classic. Yeah, and I think that's a very good answer. Working from the heart and from your values and being disciplined about that. Discipline is another of my values, is equal to scale. And
Mhm.
if we look sometimes in more impoverished communities, it's like I'm in a hole and I can't get out of that. And my thesis is that to get out of the hole, I need to shortcut on my values. But the thing is, you never get out of the hole doing that. You always get back in the hole, um, following, non-ethical principles and going for win-lose, going for the shortcut. Oh, I'll just take the loan from this loan shark. Um, that typically doesn't work. Is that what we see predominantly that is preventing entrepreneurship in these communities?
Yeah. But I think that I think the entrepreneurship in the communities are getting better, right? We're seeing more now than any other time, communities of color opening up businesses in our communities, in our neighborhoods. That's what's needed. So we're seeing that folks are really pushing through and doing that. So the game is changing in that way. And I'm here to celebrate and support that. However, I can, mentoring other businesses, or putting them in touch with access to capital, because that's important, like I mentioned earlier. So I do think that that is increasing, that is getting better.
I think there's a lot of opportunities also in these markets. For example, I think I told you that I talked with this Black business owner not so long ago. He does supplements and protein in these communities, and basically, it's a growing market. Health is starting to be more important, and it has been in the last couple of years, but it's kind of catching up to these trends. Can be a good market opportunity, but for example, here in Mexico, we often see big sugar and big food like Coca-Cola market to people. What if a Coca-Cola comes to you and asks you like, hey, can I use your service to understand more these communities to sell better to them? Talking about ethics, what would you say to them?
Well, there's two I guess sectors that I don't do business with and I would not do. One is nicotine, that I won't do, and then another one is like guns. We had, like somebody wanted to do a hunting project or a gun project with us, and I politely turned it down because that does not fit in my model of integrity. I don't necessarily, personally, I don't believe in that. And that's a whole nother ball of wax. It's a whole nother conversation. And authenticity and being authentic to myself and to my business. So yes, there are times where I say, no thanks, this doesn't really align with us, or We've had some political things that have come across, and if it's not aligning with the political beliefs, my political beliefs, I'm not selling out.
Right. And I mean, by nicotine, you mean tobacco and inhaling, because I'm a biohacker. I use nicotine various times and it's not unhealthy, but the smoking, inhaling of it is. So
Yeah.
for example, yeah, the nicotine toothpicks and so forth, it's one of the best mind enhancing and safest drugs. It's just when you
Oh,
smoke the
really?
thing, nicotine itself in its purest form. Us biohackers, we may take a gum, for example, or a toothpick to increase brain performance. Smoking pretty much anything, whether it's marijuana or meth or anything, it's just bad for the lungs, right? The lungs are not made to
Yeah.
inhale that, and that creates cancer. But the second part, what kind of damages have you seen in these communities um, with gun, and gun control is a tough issue right now? Like, what's your take on it?
Yeah. I think that the United States, enough is enough. We should have gun control. We should have checks and balances in place to make sure that folks that are bearing arms everything is right upstairs. What I mean by that is everything right mentally. Um, I think that where we are in this country with guns and gun control, we don't have any gun control. And look what's happening. I mean, we have like a mass shooting. We're almost numb to it now as Americans. Enough is enough. So my stance on it is we need gun control reform, and we need it now, right now.
You also do LGBTQ studies.
Yeah.
What interesting trends have you seen in that domain?
Well, we've seen, what have we seen? Well, we've seen more folks being more authentic and being more okay with where they're at, with their gender identity, with who they are. And we've seen that folks are just more okay with showing themselves to the world. And I think that's amazing. We all need to be okay with that, and the world needs to accept that. And that's that. So that's a great trend that we're seeing, is folks are more like, this is what it is. And we're seeing that more, of course, with the Gen Z, and then behind the Gen Z is the Alpha generation. And we're seeing more authenticity there too, with them just wanting to be out there in the world and being okay with that. And it is what it is. I think it's a beautiful thing, because diversity really, really makes this world go round. And the more diversity, the better.
Yeah, well, why intervene in other people's life? Let them be what they want to be, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're next level up there, mentally speaking, I can ignore pretty much everything about me. If I don't like two men kissing together, I can look away. Why
Mm-hmm.
intervene in their world? Just let them be. Just like they don't mess around with me for, I don't know, having a crappy hairstyle. Um, I mean, I won't tell them much. Like, I'll just let them live. That's what the meaning of a community is. Give them freedom, and also help one another once we need that help. And win-win's always the mindset. I
Let me
want to
tell you,
ask
live and
you,
let live.
yeah, there you go. AI in your business, do you feel an AI could run these market research project of yours, by one, in the sending part, and second, in the analysis part?
Wow. And this is something that's coming up a lot in our industry. Okay, so I was having a conversation with somebody about this the other day, and I was like, I feel like folks feel like AI is like the new immigrant, where everybody is shook and they're like, all the immigrants are going to take all the jobs. AI is going to take all the jobs. That kind of similar correlation as when immigrants were coming to this country. Everybody's all paranoid that immigrants are going to take all the jobs, right? So now people are saying the same thing about AI. I think AI is a tool that can be used if it's used responsibly. Do we use AI at Ebony? Responsibly. You know, if we're putting together a screener or something like that, and we want to look up, you know, how many different kinds of sodas there are, AI is something quick that can spit that out. I do not think AI is ready for an analysis yet. I think we still need that human touch. We still need that human interpersonal interaction with each other. We need that. Also for interviewing, we still need that. We still need that personal touch. Can you imagine if we were sitting here having this conversation and you were AI or a robot or something like that? This conversation would be so much different. It would miss, what would it miss? The human element. And the human element, in my head, is where you're really able to get those findings. All those extra questions that you asked, all those other probes that you asked, you think AI is doing that? Maybe, but I don't know if it would be done authentically, and I don't know if it would be done with a human touch. So I think AI is a good tool if it's used responsibly. And I see your thinking. You have go ahead.
Let
What you
me give
got?
you my opinions.
Yeah, please.
So the immigration thing, I mean, I don't have nice words to say about that because it's just folks that do not understand the economics of an immigrant coming in the country. First, it's someone that will pay tax. For second, it's someone that will spend in the economy. Is just hillbillies. I don't have better words than that. And also, what you guys have in the US that is still your number one advantage, which is while you'll stay a superpower. I do consider myself to be the US person. Also, although I don't have my citizenship yet. But the number one advantage is that you attract super brains. You attract little geniuses from India, from Europe, Africa, anywhere in the world, China, and all the little genius, they come here. So that's one genius less for China, one more for US. That's the net win. Anyway, for AI, well, I think an AI could ask better questions than myself. Is it there yet? No. Well, in the current state of technology, it's probably like 80% there. We could have a scarily similar Charles that would not have brain highs and lows, but it wouldn't be as good as I am right now. Will it be better? Yes. I was smiling because, yeah, authenticity and human factor, what does that mean? You know, because in the end, we're cells and we're kind of pre-programmed to say stuff as well. So not sure about that one, but for your point to AI, well, that is a real threat. Let me tell you that. Unlike immigrants, right? Like this right there, yes, fully accurate. Why? The AI doesn't pay taxes. The AI doesn't consume other than electricity and computers and GPUs. And that will be a drastic shift for the economy. I think that textually the AI will do pretty good for your market research. Verbally, it won't. And even if the technology is there, you know, the question is, how do you piece it together? And if you would piece it together, or I would piece it together, it would take us like probably 1,000 hours, you know? So what's the ROI on that? It's not. It's probably better for you to just wait, I don't know, the Survey Monkey to come up with an AI feature. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting conversation. And another point here would be like, how will impoverished communities or non-privileged communities use AI or be used by AI? That is a scary one.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think I just want to clarify something that I was saying with the immigrant and AI, how people were afraid of immigrants. I'm from a family of immigrants, but I'm just saying people were afraid of that, and they're afraid of AI in the same way. And I don't think in my head that we should be so afraid of AI yet if it's used responsibly. But there
I
goes that
think we
face
should be
again.
really scared. I
Really?
think,
Okay.
yeah, and it's not about, because fear, you know, is an emotion.
Yeah.
I kind of surpassed that. I don't think I'll ever be replaced by AI, but that's because I'm in the 0.1%, you know. I'm
Yeah.
in this hunter class that constantly adapts, you know, and is constantly looking for the next thing. But I do think that most humans will will be shook by AI. And that is, that's why this giving folks equal opportunity, I didn't really understand that before, because I was like, what does it matter to me? I'm this high achiever, this odd guy. Recently, I have realized that, yeah, I was privileged. But I do think that we need to have folks pick up speed, not just quote unquote impoverished communities, but pretty much like all students will face trouble there, as GPT is smarter than most students and most interns. It's a 7 on 10, and when you think
Yeah.
of an intern, you get some 5 on 10, you get the 6 on 10 performance when they come in your business. And it's becoming one of my priorities to make it available to anyone, that knowledge, and to have people drastically adapt. And one other scary trend that we're seeing nowadays is that people don't really want to work, of Gen Z. I'm not sure if that's a gross overstatement, but I've heard that quite a lot. I've seen it as well in my own company and in other business owners, and that would increase the gap as we go. And we can say, oh, they're on TikTok, they're being influencer. Reality is that like 0.0001% influencers make good cash. I'm not talking about OnlyFans here. Even OnlyFans is decreasing. And that, yeah, being an influencer, well, think of who's on TikTok, right? It's mostly young people that don't make good cash. So even if you have 1 million followers on TikTok, your audience makes $426 a year. My CEO audience makes 426K a year. So anyway, I'm not this is not super positive, but I'll be focusing some actions to make sure that people get knowledge and can adapt and can hyper use technologies to survive and thrive.
Why do you think Gen Zers aren't working as much? I mean, I've heard that. Now, I think that is a pretty blanket statement.
Yeah.
I think there are several out there that are hustling, that are doing their thing, but it's a different thing, and it's a different kind of hustle in my head, the way I see it.
I
So why
lack
do you
of
think?
statistics on that one. So that is one. I need to check the stats. Maybe you could enlighten me on that one, but
Yeah. Like,
I'd
why do
love
you
to
think
see
that
like
is?
and for example, the sister of my wife, I think she's like 24, something like that. Maybe she's
Mhm.
part of that gen. I mean, and even that is like really biased data there. But if I would have, first I need to get the stats. I will get these stats because yeah, I don't like talking on top of my head. And second, I think there's obvious bias in there. We always like shit on the generation prior to us. And third, if
Mhm.
my hypothesis was right, is it because they've been giving even more than me? Is it because they grew up on technology and got addicted to it and got like TikTok zombie brains with mobile devices? That would be like two trends that could potentially justify that hypothesis.
And I think that you're on so many points there, where one, how generations prior to other generations, we're always talking smack about the previous generation. Oh, their music sucks. Oh, this is, or they can't do this. And back in my day, every generation says the back in my day thing. So I hear you, and I do hear you too on the fact that they started off with more, right, than what we started off with. Um, I don't know if that's just, yeah. And yeah, I do think though there is a difference of the work ethic in some instances. Also, they're seeing their parents work from home. Like Gen Z and then Alpha generation that comes after them. Like my kids, they see me working from home. And I don't know, they know what I do, but it's like I don't know if they know how hard I'm working. When I was younger, I'm a millennial. When I was younger, my parents, I saw them physically leaving the house. I saw them physically hustling. I physically saw that. But my kids, they see me on a laptop all day, and they're like, they don't know if mommy's playing Minecraft or if I'm no, folks don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I think there's also there's a difference there in terms
Yeah.
of what we are seeing, what the younger generation is seeing.
And then I'm asking myself, the COVID break, like, what kind of effect it had. Surely on the social side, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it helped. But like me, I grew up like addicted to World of Warcraft and video games like that. And was I social? Yes, I was. But I don't think humans can lose their social skills. Sort of. It definitely made me weird and made me comfortable using a computer and talking to you right now on the Zoom call. But interesting questions. Let's leave it to that for today. Like, where can people find out more about you, Kai?
Cool. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, Kai Fuentes, or go to our website, ebonysystems.com, and I can be found there. I'm not on Twitter or anything like that because it's just too much. It's just too much after a while.
It's a bit
But
toxic to Twitter. Like I even see it in
exactly.
myself in my posts, like it's the Twitter vibe.
Okay. Well, yeah, I haven't experienced that because it just seems it's just too much stuff. So just hit me up on LinkedIn or check out our website.
There you go. And I am Charles Cormier, your host. That was a founder wisdom podcast.com.